What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got a reaction to Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds, brought to us by our friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Evan David. Thank you, Evan David. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out that Patreon link below, or the Patron link on the end screen. Couldn't do it without the patrons. Let's give a one-time donation, one-time reaction. Check out our Buy Me a Coffee page, also linked below. While I live in the United States, I had no idea this even existed. Never heard of it. Never heard of Jeff Wayne. Never heard of any of it. But I've learned through Evan David's research that if you live in the UK, you probably do know that this exists. But let's jump into the quick facts. Evan David's facts are always fantastic. I'm just going to let you know ahead of time the music's not going to be in this video. So if you want to watch this whole reaction with the music, go ahead and click on the Vimeo link down below. Now, also I will tell you, we're going to do this in two parts because it's a very long album and it's a lot to digest too for one watching for you. So we're going to do this in two parts, side one, side two of the album. All right, let's jump into it. These are all Evan David's words. Rock and roll legend has it that the genesis of Jeff Wayne's magnum opus studio album, namely his musical version of The War of the Worlds from 1978, can in fact be traced back some 80 years beforehand to 1898, which is when H.G. Wells' novel of that name first saw publication in book form. Wells himself would later recall that the novel itself in turn originated in a remark made to me by my brother as we were walking on Primrose Hill in London on one day, about the bombardment of some village in the South Seas. How would it be with us, he said, if some creatures of a vastly superior power came down among us and behaved like a drunken man-of-war's crew let loose among some gentle savages, end quote. Evan David says this seminal sci-fi saga of the plight of hapless human bystanders caught in the wake of a seemingly unstoppable alien invasion from Mars has moreover repeatedly struck a singularly monstrous chord with audiences to this day. For while the original novel itself has never gone out of print, the basic Wellesian story has since been re-released and reimagined in various incarnations on multiple media formats over the ensuing decades, with the most infamous example undoubtedly being the notorious Halloween radio broadcast of an updated and Americanized version of The War of the Worlds made by Orson Welles, no relation to H.G., by the way, in 1938, which allegedly terrified a significant proportion of its listeners into believing that it was happening for real. As such, not only did said infamous radio broadcast, as well as numerous movie adaptations, such as those of George Powell in 1953, Steven Spielberg in 2005, for example, help to prove the recurring cultural power of The War of the Worlds as a concept in and of itself. It also played a key role in demonstrating the broader idea that, as the critic A.A. Gill once put it, quote, along with Jules Verne, Wells invented science fiction, the abiding format of today's films, games, and fiction, from alien invasion to time travel, dystopian futures, hallucinations, and medical nightmares. He has always been a significant influence on television, too. There would be no Doctor Who without Wells, end quote. Evan David says, in the meantime, however, and whereas most adaptations of The War of the Worlds have repeatedly followed Orson Welles' example by shifting or updating the basic setting of the story in order to appeal even more strongly to audiences' seemingly endless desire to vicariously indulge in alien destruction of their own contemporary society, by contrast, one of its most successful adaptations, namely this, the Jeff Wayne musical version, which is the subject of this review, instead significantly bucked this trend by retaining Welles' original setting of late Victorian, early Edwardian England, with the resulting album, as Wellesian expert Peter J. Beck puts it, remaining, quote, truer than most to Welles' original template concerning time, place, and storyline. In many respects, he offers the most definitive audiovisual retelling of Welles' The War of the Worlds, end quote. Prior to recording his version of The War of the Worlds in the mid-70s, however, Jeff Wayne himself, who was born in New York in July 1943, but had spent most of his working life in the UK as a producer and musical director for various artists, including singer-songwriter pop star David Essex, of whom more later, as well as writing a myriad of musical advertising jingles and other TV themes, was apparently largely unfamiliar with H.G. Wells' original story before his father, Jerry Wayne, suggested that amidst a number of other science fiction stories by the likes of the aforementioned Jules Verne, John Wyndham, and Aldous Huxley that were under construction, it would be the most suitable subject to be adapted as a musical. Jeff Wayne, in turn, would later recall how, after only reading the novel once, quote, I could already hear sound. It was the one which I felt could be adapted into a musical interpretation and not just a spoken word recording with musical accompaniment. Further explaining elsewhere that, quote, what inspired me about the book, other than its possibilities from a musician's perspective, was its underlying theme of man's struggle on Earth, end quote. Duly inspired, Wayne succeeded in acquiring the necessary rights to adapt the novel as a concept album in 1975. beginning what became a lengthy, painstaking recording process during which he envisaged my version of the War of the Worlds as an opera story with motifs, musical phrases, sounds, and compositions that relate to the whole. By January 1976, after having at first worked off an initial draft script written by his stepmother, Doreen Wayne, Jeff Wayne in turn decided to book studio time to record the album in Advision Studios in Fitzrovia, London, beginning in May of that year, so as to provide himself with further motivation to finish his first full draft of the project, a process which he eventually completed in 6 weeks. The broader recording process itself, meanwhile, would eventually last until June 1977, costing a grand total of £240,000, roughly £1.9 million in 2025. Overall, which CBS Records had agreed to pay £75,000, almost £600,000 today, with Wayne having to fund the remainder himself. Evan David doesn't go into it in the research. I wonder how did he have that kind of money, right? The result of all this, as Peter Beck once again puts it, was that, quote, reportedly the project's critical break-even figure was 150,000 album sales, a tall order for a so-called concept album lacking an obvious target audience at a time when punk and disco were all the rage. Conversely, science fiction films, including George Lucas's Star Wars and Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, were doing well at the box office. Of course, one way to secure publicity and boost album sales was to recruit named stars. And indeed, the final cast of Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds duly included some formidable names from the world of contemporary music, including Thin Lizzy frontman Phil Lynott, Chris Thompson from Man for Man's Earth Band, and Justin Hayward of Moody Blues fame, as well as West End musical singer Julie Covington and the aforementioned David Essex, all of whom played key acting roles, while other well-known musicians of the time, such as bassist Herbie Flowers and guitarist Chris Spedding and Joe Partridge, contributed their own talents to the more instrumental aspects of the album soundtrack, as did Ken Freeman on synthesizers. Justin Hayward in particular, who in his role of the sung thoughts of the journalist would perform one of the album's key tracks, the wistfully melancholy Forever Autumn, would later recall his role in the album's recording process as follows, quote, I went down to the little studio called Advision on Oxford Street. I'd kind of learned the song anyway before I got there, and Jeff got all the atmosphere. He was an atmosphere kind of person, and he had to have the mood right. He'd done everything except the voices, so I did the voices and the backing vocals as well. Then he explained everything to me about the project. The next few weeks, I got more involved with the project. I played the guitar, and I did some other songs on it, and I was generally sort of hanging around. I took a fee, which was a big mistake. I'd done a lot of those things before, and nothing had ever happened. So I got used to saying, yeah, great, I'll have the money up front, which is what I did because I knew the music was great, but I thought, who the hell's going to try and sell this, and who's going to buy it? In 76, I recorded it. In 78, it came out, and actually, it was bought by a lot of young kids, 9, 10-year-old kids, first of all. And then suddenly it appeared in the charts, and then the record company called, and they said, would you go on top of the pops? Your song is the hit from it. So it's wonderful, really. I went all over the world with it. It was a hit all over the world, end quote. By far the most significant piece of casting in connection to Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds project, however, would turn out to be that of legendary Welsh actor and Hollywood star Richard Burton, as a seemingly anonymous central figure of the unnamed journalist whose melodiously powerful voice and would provide the vital connective tissue which would draw the whole project together. As Jeff Wayne himself would later put it, quote, I wanted someone with a voice that would take the listener right inside this world. In my view, Richard Burton's voice was like a musical instrument, end quote. Indeed, Burton's vocal contributions to the album, which he mostly recorded over just one day in Los Angeles, would become so integral to the project that they would even remain part of the War of the Worlds stage show, which would be performed many years after Burton's own death in 1984, wherein they would be depicted using a holographic projection of Burton's own disembodied head. It's a little strange, but I know they do that all the time. Following its eventual completion in June 1977, the album would finally be released in the UK almost a year later, on the 9th of June 1978 to be exact, although its US release would be delayed for some time after that because, as the then head of A&R at CBS's American branch, Columbia Records, allegedly put it at the time, even though it was, quote, an unusually good album, we don't see a 95-minute continuous work happening anywhere in the world, especially in America. Such transatlantic reluctance would swiftly be overcome by the album's formidable sales figures elsewhere in the world, however, which reached a grand total of over 1 million records sold within a mere 6 weeks, and while it would eventually reach no higher than number 5 in the UK, it would nevertheless remain part of the album charts for over 30 years, becoming the UK's 32nd highest selling album of all time by 2018, with a grand total of around 15 million albums sold worldwide. Given the frankly overpowering nature of his commercial success ever since its release, it is unsurprising that Jeff Wayne's version of War of the Worlds has seen itself seen several revivals and or reincarnations during the intervening years to boot, including several touring live shows, the latter of which would see Liam Neeson take on the key narrative role of the journalist from 2006 onwards. Moreover, the album has also spawned several tie-in video games over the years, as well as a largely VR-based interactive production called The Immersive Experience from 2019 onwards in London. Despite all this apparent evolution, however, it is nevertheless the original 1978 album version that remains at the project's musical core, and as a longtime fan of sci-fi in general and of H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds in particular, this album has long been one of my personal favorites, and the only reason that I have not asked Sean or Trey to review it for me long ago is I was afraid that the aforementioned 95-minute plus total running time would render it prohibitive in logistical terms. But after having decided to hopefully split the burden in two, we're going to have two different parts. Disc 1, a.k.a. The Coming of the Martians, and Disc 2, a.k.a. Earth Under the Martians. Separately, hopefully this will make doing so a lot more practical undertaking. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed both parts of the album. I look forward to seeing what the RTTC community in general makes of either or both parts in the comments below each video in turn. Now we're going to begin with Disc 1 of the War of the Worlds album proper, suitably titled The Coming of the Martians. So a couple things of housekeeping. Once again, a reminder, music won't be in the video, be at the Vimeo link below. Secondly, part 2 will be up soon. So if you're watching this right when this dropped, it's not going to be here. But if you're watching it a little while after it drops, so it's dropping in November of 2025, then just look below in the description of this video and part 2's link will be there. All right, let's kick it off with obviously the opening track, The Eve of the War, beginning with Richard Burton's unforgettable narration of the novel's opening lines. This compelling, somewhat disco-influenced opening tune both serves as the perfect staging ground for the rest of the album, as well as being thoroughly engrossing and entertaining in its own right, as I hope you'll agree. It's long. All of these are super long because honestly, it's just probably one work of art, right? But we just split it up into songs to make it seem more manageable. All right, let's get it. All right, pretty simple. I'm not going to really break it down. You guys get it. I mean, he's just introducing the story. Kind of amazed that anybody thought this was no big deal. At first, he was told it's no big deal. There's no life on there. Don't worry about the things coming from there. And then, you know, it gets there, it lands and causes this big crater, and they're afraid a man's trying to get out. It's too hot. They can't get there. He's reflecting back like, I can't believe no one was panicked at the time. So people just roll on with their lives. Except we got track 2, Horcel Common and the Heat Ray, with both music and events on the album taking a suitably sinister sounding turn as the Martians begin to emerge from their initial landing pit in Woking in Surrey, southern England. This tune's distinctively eerie atmosphere, in fact, owes as much to the more humbly primitive sound effects provided by Jeff Wayne's wife Geraldine as it does to the more obviously high-tech sounding synths of the day, with Peter Beck again remarking how, quote, reportedly her kitchen saucepans played a key role in that chilling sequence when the lid of the Martian cylinder was unscrewed and crashed to the ground in front of a crowd of local residents. So the first song had, various instruments to build, kind of some odd instruments at times to build the atmosphere. This, I'm sure, will be the same. All right, so we're advancing the story, obviously, and our protagonist is checking it out, goes home, doesn't sleep very well. Then he figures out, oh, well, the heat ray is within striking distance of my house now as they're coming in closer, yet still no one's really freaking out. I've never read The War of the Worlds. I mean, I know what it's about. I've never read it. So kind of unfolding for me here. And then at the very end, the second one lands. So we're going to progress into the next track. But I will say, like I said, it's all one story, really. They're just kind of divided into tracks. But the instrumentation on here, while it's necessary, I totally get it to like separate things. It does seem to be a bit long to me, but that's just me. And maybe the more you listen to this, it makes more sense to you. But it's very, very drawn out. But like I said, maybe the longer it goes on and the more you listen to it, the more it works for you. We got the artillery and the fighting machine picking up the pace both musically and plot-wise as the Martians fully emerge in their monstrously iconic tripod fighting machines to create their unearthly brand of havoc. This briskly action-packed tune also introduces us to two key elements that recur throughout much of the rest of the album, namely the chastened and increasingly cynical words of the young artillerymen, as played by the aforementioned David Essex, and the Martians' own hauntingly iconic cry of "Ula" that becomes their signature sound throughout the album. I guess I said that right. We're about to find out. All right, the story is definitely advancing. I won't relive it all to you. The soldier comes in, they take off. He's trying to go to London. The fighting machines appear. They do kill one guy, 6 artillerymen, but then they try to get him again. Those guys run away. Somebody else draws the arms. They get killed. So, you're realizing it's futile already. And, the instrumentation does do a really good job. And the instrumentation's super well done. Does a good job of like putting you in in that environment, man, and kind of growing the drama. Got 2 songs left on this side, so this reaction. Forever Autumn, first released as an edited single a week prior to the album's own release in June 1978, reaching number 5 in the UK. In the process, the music underlying this wistfully romantic and melancholy tune had apparently first been used as a commercial single for Lego, of all things, before being repurposed for this album and sung by Justin Hayward of the Moody Blues, who read recalled how, quote, Jeff Wayne called me up and asked me if I was the guy who sang Nights in White Satin, and I told him yes, I might have done that one. He had the music and the lyrics that I went into the studio and recorded it in a day. The beautiful results have truly stood the test of time, Evan David says. All right, Forever Autumn, the first actual song for the most part on this album. Justin Hayward is singing Richard Burton's thoughts. So same character, just FYI. He's looking for Carrie, gets to the house, she's not there. So he's swept up with the masses trying to get out. The only way you're going to get out, it's 1898. There's no planes. You're going to get out by boat or ship. That's it. So as he gets to the shore and he sees Carrie on the ship as the ship is closing up. So at least he knows she's safe, but he also probably feels helpless and it's pointless now. But that song wasn't quite, it was done, but now we're going to go right into the last song on this side. Thunderchild, closing his first disc of the album with a suitably rousing depiction of the valiant last stand of organized human resistance to the Martian onslaught. Turns out that being the strongest naval power in the world won't do you that much good if the invaders can effectively bypass the channel anyway. Alongside Richard Burton's ever-gripping narration, special credit must also be given to Chris Thompson's performance as the voice of humanity, a concept which could easily become a bit corny in lesser hands, but which in this case becomes distinctly moving as we say a collective, hearty, farewell Thunderchild before turning to disc 2 to see what becomes of Earth under the Martians. All right, Thunderchild, which we learn Carrie's ship is trying to leave. Here come the Martians. There's a warship coming in, Thunderchild, who comes right at them. So the ship is able, we learn at the very end, to escape. So Carrie's able to get away, at least for now. You're not really going to escape anything, right, if they're going to take over the world. But out away from all of this chaos. But Thunderchild downs one of the creature's machines, and then they end up, the heat rays all come at them. And it sinks to the bottom, and the people's despair goes, okay, now there's nothing left to keep them from taking over. So I thought it was well done as well. So that's going to end side 1. I'm not going to pick any favorites or any of that stuff, but Evan David says it seems a bit pointless for him to pick a top 3 tracks, thinking at this point, given that there are only 5 songs on the disc. But it's fair to say that the undoubted highlights so far for me are The Evil War and Forever Autumn. Anyway, see you in part 2, so that is going to be my farewell to you. Remember to check down below for a link if you're watching this anytime after it released. Thanks again to Evan David for bringing this one. Thanks again for watching. Come back for part 2.